Saturday night. Washington Hilton. A room filled with power, influence, and attention. Around 2,600 people gathered under one roof, journalists, politicians, celebrities, all watching, all listening. The President of the United States sitting just feet away from the stage, surrounded by the very people who shape public narrative. It was supposed to be controlled. Predictable. Secure. And then, in a matter of seconds, it wasn't. Gunshots cut through the noise. Not one. Not two. Multiple. At first, confusion. Some thought it was part of the event. A joke. A sound effect. But then came the reaction, chairs scraping, people dropping, the unmistakable shift from normalcy to panic. Secret Service agents didn't hesitate. They moved with precision, surrounding Donald Trump and rushing him out of the room. The entire line of succession began to disappear just as quickly. Within moments, what had been one of the most tightly managed public events in the country turned into chaos. But what happened that night is not just about those few seconds. Because when you step back, when you go through the documents, the timeline, the witness statements, something else starts to take shape. Something deeper. Something far more uncomfortable than a single headline or viral clip can explain. Within minutes of the shooting, the internet had already decided what it was looking at. Some called it karma. Others said it was staged. Entire narratives formed before the facts had even finished unfolding. And yet, almost all of those narratives missed something critical. The reality is more complicated. According to official statements, a 31-year-old man approached a security checkpoint outside the ballroom and opened fire. A Secret Service officer was hit, saved only by a bulletproof vest. The suspect was subdued and taken into custody. Charges were filed. On the surface, it looked contained. A threat neutralized. A crisis managed. But that surface-level version leaves out the parts that matter most. Days before the shooting ever happened, the suspect had already set things in motion. He had written a manifesto. Not after the fact, not as an explanation, but before. He sent it to his own family, outlining his thoughts, his grievances, his intent. This wasn't a moment of impulse. It wasn't chaos erupting out of nowhere. It was structured. Planned. Documented. And it didn't go unnoticed. Members of his own family raised alarms. They contacted authorities. They reported concerning behavior. They warned that something wasn't right. After the attack, those same family members would again reach out, pointing to the manifesto, trying to connect the dots that had already been visible. So now the situation becomes harder to ignore. You have a suspect who planned the attack. A document that outlined intent. A family that tried to warn law enforcement. And yet, despite all of that, the attack still happened. That's where the story shifts. Because at that point, it's no longer just about one individual. It becomes a question of systems. Of gaps. Of what was missed, or perhaps, what wasn't acted on in time. And then there's the location. A commercial hotel. That detail matters more than most people realize. Yes, there was security. Yes, there were checkpoints. Inside the ballroom, the environment was tightly controlled. But the building itself operated differently. It wasn't a sealed government facility. It was a functioning hotel, with guests, rooms, entrances, and movement that couldn't be completely locked down without shutting the entire structure. Witness accounts started to highlight something specific. Access points that weren't as restricted as people assumed. Pathways that allowed movement between levels. The reality that someone with a room key could navigate areas closer to the event than expected. And most importantly, the possibility that a weapon, disassembled, concealed, reassembled, could exist within that space without immediate detection. When you put all of that together, the picture changes. The President of the United States, along with key government officials, was inside a venue that had a vulnerability built into its very design. Not because of negligence in the moment, but because of the environment itself. A commercial space can only be controlled to a certain extent. Beyond that, it relies on layers of security that must work perfectly every time. That night, something in that system didn't hold. The timeline makes it even clearer. The event had been publicly announced well in advance. The attendance was known. The location was known. Anyone paying attention had access to that information. That alone doesn't create danger, but combined with intent, with planning, with opportunity, it becomes something else entirely. When the shots were fired, the response was immediate. That part worked. Secret Service agents moved with speed and coordination. Trump was evacuated. Other officials were secured. The room was cleared. From a reaction standpoint, the system did exactly what it was designed to do. But prevention is a different standard. Prevention means identifying risk before it reaches the point of action. It means closing gaps before they can be used. And in this case, the presence of a manifesto, prior warnings, and a navigable environment suggests that the risk existed long before the first shot was fired. What followed only added to the complexity. As footage spread and reports came in, the narrative began to split. Some focused entirely on politics, on rhetoric, on language, on the broader climate. Others dismissed those arguments completely, framing the incident as a straightforward act of violence against a sitting president. Both sides found evidence to support their perspective. Both sides amplified the points that aligned with their views. But in doing so, something else faded into the background. The operational reality of what happened. The structure of the venue. The flow of access. The sequence of decisions that allowed the situation to develop in the first place. These are not as emotionally charged as political arguments, but they are just as important, if not more so, when it comes to preventing future incidents. Because this wasn't an isolated environment. Public events like this happen regularly. Large gatherings. High-profile attendees. Locations that are secure, but not absolute. Each one carries a level of risk that has to be managed in real time, with real consequences if something goes wrong. And now, there's a precedent. An example that will be studied, analyzed, and referenced in decisions moving forward. Security protocols will be reviewed. Access points will be reconsidered. The balance between openness and control will be pushed further toward restriction. For the public, that may mean less access. More barriers. More distance from the people and institutions they came to see. For those responsible for security, it means something else. It means understanding that the gap between a controlled environment and a secure one is not always visible, until it is tested. The investigation is still ongoing. More details will emerge. Charges may expand. Reports will be written. Conclusions will be drawn. But even now, certain elements are already clear. This was not random. It was not entirely unpredictable. And it was not just about a single moment of violence. It was the result of a sequence. Planning. Warning. Access. Action. A chain that, at multiple points, could have been interrupted but wasn't. And that's the part that matters most. Because incidents like this don't just end when the suspect is taken into custody. They leave behind questions. About systems. About decisions. About what needs to change. Until those questions are answered, the story isn't over. And the gap that allowed it to happen doesn't disappear. It waits.